Hello, everyone. I suppose if I was professional, I could keep notes and learn to edit and everything. I don't know actually. I talked to one of my friends who knows a little bit about editing, but she said that depending on what device you're using, that the styles of editing vary quite a bit. If I was on a desktop, it would be one thing. If I was using a laptop, it would be something else. And then you have Windows operating systems and technology, which I really know nothing about. I think that people who work in graphic design and any kind of visual media art use a lot of technology, a lot of Apple products. But I never really fell in love with Apple as a company, and this is a tarot review, so I'm not even going to get into all that. Um, yes, I see our friend is with us, the ghost. Hello. Ooh. I'm filming at night again, so I'm assuming that it's a light issue. I would love to be able to show you guys, like, when I'm reviewing a tarot deck, I would love to be able to either learn how to change the view on my camera while shooting. I think actually that's not possible from what I've heard, but I don't know why you can't, because you can swivel when you're taking a still very quickly, so I don't see why you can't just flip the focus. What does this do? I don't know. There's some little thing with a face on it. I was just seeing what that does. Anyway, that's a bird. That's how late I've been up. That is a blue whistling thrush singing. And they have a very nice song. And that particular bird only sings very, very early in the morning. So it's just like 5:30 in the morning where I am. Anyway, when I'm reviewing tarot decks, it would be actually nice to be able to show you kind of little spreads and stuff so that I could do like a mock reading and also compare some things, like lay out a whole bunch of cards from one suit maybe, or the same denomination. One of the things that I noticed in the Siamese deck is that all the queens have an interesting. I'm kind of fighting with the selfie stick. All the queens have this sort of interesting pattern in the way that they've been depicted, which I might get into in one video if I ever learn how to do everything. Anyway, last time I said that I would talk about the deck that I brought from India. I had about 12 decks in India that I collected over time. I'm like one of these crazy collectors. I was just talking to someone who collects action figures that are inspired by Japanese anime and manga, comic books, stories. I'm sorry, this is going to drive you guys nuts. Anyway. Oh, that's a little bit better. Okay. So, the deck that I brought from India is called the Watersprite Tarot, and I went to some trouble to get it. It is an independently published deck made by, I believe it's Alice Muir. It's a Gaelic middle name. Muir MacDonald. And it's called the Watersprite Tarot. It's kind of just, I don't know if she chose that name with a specific idea in mind, but it sounds kind of like it would be some sort of fetish tarot where there'd be water sprites in every card for no particular reason, but it's not. You would be hard pressed to find a water sprite in any of the paintings, depending even on what your definition of a water sprite is. But most tarot decks that are produced today are based on the designs of either Aleister Crowley, which is to say the paintings of Lady Harris, or Arthur Waite, which is Pamela Coleman Smith, because in both those cases the artwork was actually done by women. And it was sort of at the direction of these two occultists, Aleister Crowley and Arthur Waite, who were members of the Order of the Golden Dawn. And they did not see eye to eye, especially about tarot, but they each had produced tarot decks with their vision in mind. And so, although I just said that in my last video, the Siamese tarot really is not notably based on Rider-Waite, I'm saying that kind of as my own opinion, but I know I can definitely recognize that it's more leaning toward that system than any other. And when people are talking about tarot decks that are based on Arthur Waite, they're talking about a couple of things. One is that all the minor arcana, the numbered minor arcana, which are also known as pip cards, are pictured with full scenes and figures, which is something that Arthur Waite felt was very important. And Aleister Crowley liked to depict just symbols without any people or scenes necessarily. And usually tarot decks that are produced nowadays fall into one or the other of those two kind of general models. Now, the Watersprite tarot, interestingly enough, does not follow either of those two models. It follows the model of Tarot de Marseille, which is the French tarot from the, I think it actually came out a little earlier than either Crowley or Arthur Waite's tarot decks, but it, for some reason, did not inspire a lot of occultists to copy it. But they, the one way in which she did, Alice MacDonald did deviate from the Tarot de Marseille is that she did picture full scenes with figures in the minor arcana, which Tarot de Marseille does not. And so, but it's not in the style of Arthur Waite, in the sense that, for instance, Arthur Waite's Nine of Pentacles always shows a wealthy woman and with a bird. And generally you will see that very commonly, even in the Siamese deck, is not quite a wealthy woman with a bird, but you can tell that they were going for that kind of archetype. So here, for instance, normally the Eight of Wands would be 8 wands shooting in one direction, and there's a scene of a river and a mountain. That was Arthur Waite's image. Or in the case of Aleister Crowley's, it's 8 wands in a circle, almost like a wheel. And here we have something quite different. She has portrayed basically Sagittarius, the Pegasus, shooting an arrow kind of in the direction of the earth. And I always see this as being pricked by the dart of creativity, because I do see the Eight of Wands as a creative urge or some kind of inspiration. And I think that image is actually quite evocative. There's some amazing painting in her deck. She put so much effort into the paintings. She originated this idea and painted herself. I've chatted with her online. She described to me the inspiration for each card. And when I was moving from India, I don't think this is actually my favorite deck that I've ever encountered, because I have a very special place in my heart for Londa and Aquarian and Tarot of the Cat people. But when I thought about the one deck that I couldn't leave behind at that time, in terms of where I was emotionally, it was this one. And I didn't even exactly know why, but I knew that if I wanted to do a tarot reading for someone, or if I just wanted to play with them myself or ask a question, this would be the one that I would be most likely to want to use. And I think I'll just show you a few more random cards. But there are some very unusual depictions here for the Four of Swords. The Four of Swords in the Rider-Waite depicts a effigy on top of a coffin showing a knight praying and 4 swords hanging on the wall. And in a lot of decks that are based on that model, it actually doesn't show an effigy, but it shows someone praying for deliverance from problems. And also there's a kind of hint of avoidance going on. This is very, very different. This shows actually someone, a monk, in meditation. And there are 2 pedestals with ibis perched on them. And I mean, you can see there's a lotus pond and a frog. And the frog is... No, sorry. That was an optical illusion. I thought he was snapping up a firefly, but that was just an optical illusion because I was looking at it in the viewfinder. That's just another lotus, actually, that's just very yellow and glowy. So I think that's beautiful. And I know that in different tarot decks, there is no kind of traditional card for meditation, but in different tarot decks, I have always seen different cards as representing meditation. I know that my friend who uses Aleister Crowley's deck did think of the 4 of Swords as a meditation card. And in that sense, it's very interesting because I think that was just her thing. But coincidentally, this is definitely being depicted that way. And for me personally, the Queen of Wands, pretty much in all tarot decks that I've encountered, represents a witch archetype. Largely because I consider a wooden staff to be an implement of magic, much more than an athame or a pentagram. For me, magic comes kind of directly from the forest. It's a wooden, woodsy, earthy, but wild kind of energy. And this is where I differentiate between tarot and astrology, because I find that in astrology, the element of earth is associated with being practical and down to earth and kind of almost materialistic. And for me, in the tarot, it's the element of earth is not about that. It's actually about everything wild and everything occult. It represents the kind of nature magic that comes from the ground. And now, according to that, I actually see the suit of wands as the earth element, which I have noticed a couple of other decks have done that. I think that the Aquarian did it accidentally. I don't think David Palladini meant for his wands to look earthy, but they do, because it's all browns and greens. And so here we have the Queen of Wands in the Watersprite Tarot, and I think she is going for more of a fire element, which is, I think the majority of tarot decks think of wands as fire, but there's definitely qualities of earth there also, and it is a very witchy looking card, which I think is fabulous. And it's, you know, she's got the wild bobcat there, and it's a kind of very Artemisian archetype. And here we have the 4 of Pentacles. It is, isn't it? Yes, it is. Which, it's funny because actually her painting in a way is a bit like the naive painters of the turn of the century, who did a lot of art that looked a little bit like they hadn't learned that much about perspective and foreshortening, and that's the same thing. Perspective, foreshortening, perspective, and proportions and things like that. But they did beautiful work, and I feel like you can see that there's some unrealistic looking anomalies in terms of the size of the hands and the posture and everything, but the image is so appealing, like her use of color and the detail that went into the face. Like, it's not like, if you look at Arthur Waite or Crowley, the faces all pretty much look the same. They use very much the same style because they were going for this sort of archetypal language, where they didn't feel the need. So it's like more iconographic. So all the faces look like the same face, basically, but the symbols are meant to convey the difference of what they're holding, the way they're facing, the colors. But what I always loved about the Aquarian tarot was that all the faces were actually different and very unique. And I love that she's done that in this deck. Like each character looks like a different person. And there was one more amazing card that I wanted to show. I mean, I could show you so much of the deck because it is really quite a masterpiece. I don't think there's any card that she like did lazily or chinced on, but I mean, I have favorites. There's some that I like more than others. But that said, it's just an incredible masterpiece. And she said that she actually wanted to do a deck without using too much outline. That was kind of where she started from in her inspiration. And I can't find the card I'm looking for. But so it was this challenge that she set herself. And on top of that, she wanted to do it all in watercolor. Now, I don't know how many of you have experimented with painting. Oil paints are considered kind of like the most challenging medium to work in. And I gotta say, watercolor takes the cake. Watercolor is so frustrating. It is so hard to work with. I mean, you hear people who use watercolor and they do it as a hobby. And that is a challenging, bloody hobby. Like, okay, I'm gonna stop and look at the camera now. It is a very, very challenging hobby because you cannot control what it does. When you paint something in a watercolor, you kind of have to accept all your mistakes as they come out. It's unforgiving. And so one of the things that I found always very frustrating about watercolor was that it's very hard to get any kind of richness in watercolor. Things tend to always look very ethereal, transparent, and if you're a stickler about wanting your images to look like what they're supposed to be, like you want a cat to look like a cat, it can be very, very hard to do that in watercolor because, you know, the color could just run on you and then your cat is turning into a pig. But, so, I mean, I think that she has used some gouache or poster colors mixed in with the watercolor, which is why you have these rich blacks and stuff like that. This is a card, it's the blank card. So she added a wild card over and above the Fool, and she's showing the planets and the night sky, which I think is gorgeous. And she doesn't write anything about what that card means. It's up to you to figure it out. So Tarot de Marseille was definitely based on medieval costumes and symbolism, which I think a lot of tarot decks are. This is an exquisite depiction of the High Priestess. The one criticism I have about these cards is that they were printed on such thick cardboard that it's quite challenging to shuffle them. So where my Siamese deck, you know, it's like 78 cards fit in my hand like that. These are like a stack that is quite unwieldy when you're shuffling. And then the other thing is, in this card you can kind of see quite particularly, I think that the sizing went slightly wonky in terms of when she had them printed. I don't know if they were longer, but it looks sort of like it's diagonally squished a bit, like the image is distorted, which I think was an oversight in terms of graphic design or whoever her team was who does that. But it's still like, it doesn't even detract from her incredible artwork. I mean, you have all the phases of the moon and there's incredible water behind you. You can kind of feel the chill in the night air when you look at it. And then the surprise card for me, which normally would bug me, something like this, when people kind of do something so inconsistent with the theme of the deck, but in this particular case, I actually found it really delightfully surprising. So the whole deck is medieval symbolism, and then you have this one card, which is, it's the Five of Wands, which is actually, it's a card that I usually find is problematic to depict because it depicts a kind of a squabble argument type thing. And I love that she's chosen to show a polo match here with medieval knight tents behind. So it's this whole kind of competition theme, which I actually think is genius that she used that, because I think that, like, it's important with tarot not to limit things to be so specific and literal that you lose all of the connotations that can be there. A lot of so basically this generally represents the spirit of competition or the sense of contending with others and striving for greatness. So it doesn't also have to be a negative thing, whereas I feel like in Arthur Waite's deck and a lot of other tarot decks that followed in his footsteps, the Five of Wands often just represents squabbling, or it doesn't really offer you anything very useful. Whenever you get the Five of Wands in a spread, you're kind of looking at it going, oh, it's an argument. What am I supposed to do with that? Like, it doesn't really help. But this sort of, I feel like in combination with other cards could give you an idea of something that's happening, and you get a real picture of the situation. And oh yes, thank you for popping out. The card that I really wanted to show you is the Seven of Swords, which I have always felt represents trying to get away with something sneaky. And I love the way she has painted this with this thief man walking across water with a mask under the moon. I mean, it's just, and the way she's shown the light on the water, like, I want to make a deck like this. If I ever make a deck, this is my inspiration, definitely. And I love that she used Tarot de Marseille as the inspiration, even though it's not a deck that I ever was that inspired by myself. But I feel like we're all so tired of Crowley and Arthur and their eternal argument over the pip cards and how the major arcana should be depicted, and as if they invented tarot, which they did not. I mean, tarot was invented in the 15th century, and it was commissioned by the Visconti Sforza family. So really, Arthur and Crowley have nothing to say about the matter. I mean, they're well-read men, and they have their opinions, it's fine. But this just kind of shows like there's a whole world of tarot that has been unexplored by modern New Age enthusiasts. One thing that, like, part of her promotion for this deck was that it was based on Tarot de Marseille, and I appreciate that. I need to find another example, hang on. One thing that was a little bit irksome for me was that she did follow Crowley's system for astrological correlation, which I feel like was not really necessary for what she was trying to achieve. Now I can't remember if she did it on the court cards or the major arcana. Oh, it is major arcana, hang on. That should be Uranus. Darn it. Okay, here we go. Looking at the Hierophant here. See, part of the problem is I can't actually see very well. No, I will have to leave that topic because I can't see what I'm doing. It should be Mars. Anyone see Mars in there? So much for my big point. Well, on some of the trumps you can see the sigil for the astrological correlation, and I think it's just my bugaboo because I don't like to mix astrology and tarot, And I think the main reason that I don't like to do that is because I'm very attached to the idea of the suit of wands being symbolic of the forest and the druids and the witches. And I don't like to get into all that astrological kind of approach to elemental magic, which I think is very psychological and really only applicable to astrology. And I will leave the video there. I think that I have rambled a lot and I have left you hanging a lot while I'm rummaging in the cards, but that is just part of the process of me getting relaxed with making these videos. And I will hopefully very soon figure out how to do everything. I know that if I'd spent a little bit more time finding the perfect angle, you wouldn't have to put up with those wavy lines, but I didn't feel like fooling around because I actually like this angle on me. So, and that's why I've been looking at myself so much. Look, I look nice. Anyway, bye for now, and I hope you guys enjoy my review of the Watersprite Tarot.